Hello and welcome to the Our Prenup Lawyer podcast, where you and I get to learn more about prenups as I interview professionals from the fields of family law, couples counseling, and wealth management. I'm your host, Libby Garabedian. Let's get started. The information provided in this podcast is prepared by Our Prenup Lawyer for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. The information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. This is not legal advice or a substitute for obtaining legal advice from an attorney. A person listening or watching should not rely upon it in any manner without engaging professional counsel. The podcast is intended to communicate general information and, because recorded, may not be current. On this episode of Our Prenup Lawyer, I'm joined by Jordan Enright, founder of Enright Law, a family law firm with offices in San Diego, California, and Bellevue, Washington, dedicated to guiding modern families through divorce, custody, and family disputes with clarity and confidence. A graduate of California Western School of Law, Jordan began her career in civil litigation before focusing on family law, where her practical, results-driven strategies help parents protect their children and secure their futures. As president of California Western Alumni Association and founder of California Western Leadership Academy, she is committed to mentoring the next generation of lawyers and bridging the gap between legal education and practice. Known for combining passion with common sense, Jordan ensures her clients part with their spouse, not their sanity. Welcome, Jordan. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's jump right in. And I want to talk about how you got started in family law.
Well, I previously worked at a civil litigation firm doing all different areas of law, from construction law to actually a rape via hypnotism. It was a wide range. And it wasn't until one of the partners who did primarily family law got really sick, and I took over some of her cases. And I was like, I got to father his child back. And I'm like, wow, this is so much more impactful than, fighting over money or other things like that. And I just loved the ability to actually be more of a therapist and counselor and like move clients forward, not just the fight. And just fell in love with family law and switched and only do family law ever since.
That's great. It's wonderful that you have such a client-focused approach.
Of course.
So what services are offered at your current practice?
Pretty much, I would say the majority of the family law topics, which the main ones are divorce, child custody, child support, spousal support, domestic violence, and then prenups and what we refer to as postnups. We are thinking of adding on adoption and guardianship, but not yet. Those are those other realms of family law.
What is your attitude or philosophy towards divorce? Is it always litigate first, or do you do collaborative law or mediation?
It depends. I hate to give that attorney response, but my philosophy on divorce in general is that divorce is not a failure. It's a transition. And I think if I could give any advice on divorce in general, is the goal is not to destroy each other. We're human beings, and you love that human being at one point. And I know most of my clients hate them now, but the goal is really to redesign your family dynamic. And that's even more important if there's children involved. But as far as just overall philosophy, it's not a failure, it's a redesign. And if there's children, we're focusing on how that redesign works. If there's no children and it's just, screw him or screw her, we want to go our separate ways, then it's just recognizing the human of the other person in the past love and doing so respectfully. Now, that can mean fighting significantly, and that can mean mediation. It depends, whether there is a prenup. That's a big factor, right? The prenup will prevent a lot of that litigation. But it'll depend on the client. I do like to say, though, when you're looking for an attorney, a lot of clients in family law want what they refer to as a shark. And what I like to say is you don't want a shark. You really don't. Because if you have a shark, you have a high legal fee bill. And, maybe you win at the end, maybe you don't. Sharks kind of just create blood in the water, but they're not necessarily doing something productive. I feel like you want someone with shark tendencies and abilities, but you really want that fox, because family law is really about being more cunning and swift. And when there's kids involved, there really is no winner or loser, other than really the kids lose out. So I think bringing that common sense and human approach to family law is my my biggest focus with our clients.
That's a great perspective you have, and also an interesting point you bring up about the shark versus the fox. And what do you think are some other misconceptions people have about family law and family law attorneys in general?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about family law and related to prenups, so we can go into prenup myths later. But I think misconceptions about attorneys in general is that they like to argue all the time. Um, that is true for a lot of them. But I think what's really important is to find an attorney that the arguing moves the needle, right? We're not just arguing because the attorney has an ego. We're not just arguing to increase your bill, right? We're actually moving the needle forward and discussing and standing up for things that actually matter. A lot of times our clients are very focused on significantly emotional issues that have really not much legal relevance. And I've seen a lot of attorneys focus on those issues because their client cares about them, and their arguments can go on for months. And the trial judge is just like, why are we even talking about this? This is not a legal issue, right? So I think one of the most common misconceptions is that a lot of attorneys just like to argue, but if you find one that really is arguing to move the needle, I think that's the biggest distinction.
Going off prenups, before we talk about some common myths surrounding those, how does separation or divorce look different when there is a prenup in place versus when there is not one?
Well, a prenup is really about enforce. Like if we're going through a divorce or a mediation and you have a prenup, it's more about enforcement. And then if we're going through a divorce or mediation without one, then it's about creation. That's, I think, the simplest way to put it. The prenup is the tool that helps direct how we're going through this divorce, how we're going through this mediation. And if we don't have one, we're starting from scratch, and we're having in the divorce where it becomes really litigious is when you don't have that prenup, and we're creating together with someone that you really don't get along with anymore. It's like, how is that going to ever work, right? So why not have a rule book? Every sports team has a rule book, a playbook, right? That prenup is that playbook. So even in mediation, you have to create the prenup then, basically. It's not the prenup you're creating, but you're creating the dissolution. And so that's the biggest difference, I think, is enforcement versus creation.
I love the analogy of the prenup as a playbook because it kind of sets the stage, obviously, of how the divorce or mediation is going to go. But how have you seen prenups change over the course of your practice?
This is not a super recent change, but the 7-day rule in California, where you have to have a final version of the prenup, both parties, 7 days prior to signing. That, I think, is a lot of people think it's 7 days before the marriage, but it's 7 days before you sign it that you have that final version and no changes occur. No substantives. Like if there's missing a period, that's fine. But I think that has really changed because there used to be, prenups on the eve of the wedding, right? And it was like, give me, I want you to sign away all of your ability to, get anything from me if we divorce. So the biggest change is like more transparency and collaborativeness with that rule, specifically in California. And I think they really used to be gender specific. I think they used to be about the male typically protecting his assets, not overlooking the fact that actually the female may have more. And I think they used to be about really protecting the rich. And that has really evolved into really being a relationship planning tool that's about openness, fairness, and collaborativeness. That's what I've seen the biggest, I think, change over time with prenups happen.
Now, going off that point about how prenups were oftentimes seen as protecting the man or the wealthier spouse, what other common misconceptions do people still have about prenups?
That they're not romantic, I think. I wouldn't label them as one of the top 10 most romantic things, but I think there is a way that they really are, because they're an act of partnership and they're really setting the stage for a healthy marriage, because having those conversations before a marriage, I think, is paramount. Whether you have a prenup or not, having the discussions that a prenup talks about and forces you to talk about is what I think allows for that more successful marriage. So Maybe that's a common myth. I think another one is they only matter if you divorce. That's a big myth. No, they play a significant role in death. They play a significant role in life with creditors. I can give some examples on that, but if I'll just give one. Like, let's say husband has a business that goes into significant debt and multiple creditors are coming after the husband's business. They're able to go after not only that business, but the community property, which is wife's income. So next thing we know, wife's income is being taken by this random creditor. If there's a prenup, though, the wife can just show this prenup that her income is her separate property and they can't touch it. So that's a huge play that they have during life, and then also at death too. Those are the common misconceptions that come to mind.
So, for business owners specifically, what can clauses or provisions in a prenup look like to ensure that they maintain ownership of their business, or that if the business is built within the marriage, that themselves and their spouse receive an equal share if they split?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as you would just write that out. So if you don't have that in a prenup, if you don't have a prenup or you don't have that written into your prenup and you just talk about your current business and you don't describe future businesses, that's where those future businesses are going to be automatically deemed community property. And if you want them split 50-50, they might be anyways, even if you don't put it in there. But where I see a lot of issues is one spouse has the business and the other spouse works for the business, but not as an employee and is just helping out. And then the divorce happens. And then that spouse who was working in the business wants more of the business. So just writing it out exactly what you want to happen is all you need to do. And having a good attorney that's thinking, what if, and asking you to think like that is really, really helpful to make sure it's all written out.
Should couples be working on their estate plans in conjunction with their prenups when they're drafting them?
I always recommend that. It's not necessary. We've done prenups where the estate plans is in the works, and it's not done till later. That's okay. But you want the two documents to work collaboratively. Otherwise, you can have issues. Like, let's say you have a will in 2007 and then you get married. If the new wife wasn't in that will, that can create some issues. The prenup can fix that. You also want to say, depending on when each one was created, which one will trump if there's any disagreement between the two. A lot of times in second marriages, we'll put a lot of statutory waivers into the prenup. So, if let's say the husband dies and the wife is a surviving spouse, the wife will have a lot of statutory ability to get a lot of the estate. And that can, especially important in second marriages, she can inherit everything and this man's kids get nothing, even though he had a will. If this prenup, and so there's a lot of it depends, but they should work in conjunction. They should speak to each other and they should really set forth what controls if there's any conflict. I'd like to think of, if we're getting into death and versus a prenup, like I really like to think of death as, or estate planning, like that is who gets what. And then prenups are what's actually yours. So like we can, when you go take a will through probate, it's like, this child gets all of this, or the wife gets, the community property. Well, what is that? Like, what is the community property? The prenup will say exactly what that is and what that isn't. And it'll say, well, the business isn't that actually. So that's how they go hand in hand.
Okay, that makes sense. So couples should be working hopefully with an estate planner or an estate planning attorney to make sure that all their assets are addressed, and that if they are entering a second marriage, that if they have children from the prior marriage, that those children's interests are protected, right?
Yeah, that, this new wife isn't going to get everything and the kids get nothing. And one other thing, estate plans can unilaterally be changed at any time, right? So you could be on your deathbed and, without getting into ability to mental state, You can change your estate plan, but prenups cannot be changed unilaterally. So if, there's a big fight shortly before death and someone changes their estate plan unilaterally, you're protected by the prenup.
Okay. So now, if I want to think about the bank of mom and dad, if one spouse is entering the marriage and they're being supported by their parents, or they receive, they have property from their parents, anything related to the family that's outside of the marriage, what is a prenup going to look like for them?
It would make very clear that all of that, which we'd list out specifically prior to marriage, is that spouse's separate property. It would be very clear that if gifts like that continue, that is separate property. We'd really delineate, gifts on the day of marriage. Those are very often treated as community property. I had a client recently that was gifted a very expensive Persian rug, and there was a big fight over this Persian rug, that it was the daughter's from her dad, but it was given on the wedding day, which, made it seem like it was a marital gift. So just listing that out very specifically, that these gifts would be the separate property. And then, an inheritance is separate property, but having that specified out is going to help even further.
If someone's entering the marriage and maybe they don't have a lot of assets or accumulated wealth, how can a prenup still be a beneficial tool for them in their financial future?
It protects them. I think that's that common misconception, or how things have changed over time. They're not to just protect the rich. They're to also protect the lesser earner, because that person has the ability to garner from the estate more. So, for example, if, let's say, a husband is the richer spouse, and he has this really successful business, and he is like, I don't want to move forward with marriage unless you sign this prenup. And she's like, well, I don't have anything, and I'm a stay-at-home mother, and I don't know what to do, but I love him, and I just want to sign it. Getting a good attorney in there to say, well, let's make sure that and if you're not getting anything from the business in the event of divorce, let's make sure that you're taken care of in another way. If we're going to, statutorily waive all you're entitled to, for example, the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, or let's just figure out a lump sum from the business, or let's ensure that spousal support is in line with what the business is making, so that you're taken care of. It's protecting the under earner, so that it's not just they don't get anything. It's that maybe they're not getting this, but let's make sure they get this, this, and this.
But when should couples start talking about prenups? Because obviously in California, there's that 7-day period. But it's never helpful to have it sprung right upon you when you're in the midst of planning a wedding, right?
Right. And your attorney probably can't take it if it's right before the wedding. I had a client come to us 2 weeks before the wedding, and I'm like, you got to move your wedding. He did. But yeah, you definitely want to do it long before. It's good to get them signed as we near, just so we can have updated, financial disclosures is a huge part in California of making sure there's fair and accurate and proper disclosures. But making sure those are like through one of the recent months, like getting that as closer to the wedding date is important. I would say, the day you get engaged, enjoy it. Then you take a month, maybe you start wedding planning. It should just be a part of the wedding planning. I think wedding planners should add it to that to-do list that I remember I saw when I was planning my wedding. But I would say let's start talking about it 6 months out, and let's get it wrapped up at least 1 to 2 months out.
That's good. I like how you said that it should be part of the wedding planning and should be included on that to-do list. I think that would definitely take a lot of pressure off many people. But you touched on this earlier about couples having conversations around finances.
Well,
and prenups being a tool to facilitate that. How can couples have those productive conversations? Because they are hard.
oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always like to say, if you can't talk about money before marriage, you're going to struggle during. And getting clear on finances, and then your roles and your goals in the marriage and life is just so important to talk through before. I mean, the value of a prenup is not in the paper necessarily all the time. It's also the conversation, because if the marriage does not end in divorce, which is hopefully the case, you have that value in the conversation of knowing how we're going to go about our finances, knowing that if Johnny's business goes under, that Sarah's not going to be impacted, and having that security. I think how to have that conversation, you could use it as, well, this is on my wedding planning to-do list. But it's really just sitting down and saying, we can have the emotion in it, but just staying logical. We don't want this marriage to end ever. Here's some benefits of, if it never ends, of the prenup, that can be in the case of death or creditors, and that can be the focus. But also, I think this is a good opportunity. Maybe we even don't get a prenup, but let's talk about, are you going to pay all of the utilities and the bills? And should I be the one that pays childcare expenses? And is that going to come from your business? Should I be working as well? Does it make sense to have a 2-income household? And just kind of start like that. And then I think from there, it'll come out whether a prenup is something that feels comfortable to the parties.
What advice would you give to couples who are either on their first marriage or getting remarried when it comes to prenups?
I mean, couples who don't last don't have hard conversations. The couples who last repeat them, and repeat them with respect. So my advice is have the hard conversations and have them often. I think also stay curious about your partner. I think with marriage, you're choosing them daily, and I think you have to re-choose them daily. And if one day they surprise you with a financial decision, that might make you not want to choose them the next day. But if you've discussed the topics of a prenup before, what's raised in a prenup, it's not going to be as surprising, and it'll be easier choice that day.
I think that's great advice that will resonate with a lot of listeners. Now, as we're wrapping up, I want to know, what is the best way for listeners to reach you if they're interested in connecting?
Phone, email, or our website. Our website is www.enrightlawapc.com. Our Instagram is Enright Law, and you can reach us by phone, 858-239-6565, or feel free to email me personally, jje@enrightlawapc.com.
Excellent. And I'll include that information in the show notes so people can get it there. But thank you so much for being so candid and being on the episode today.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, Libby.
That's our show, folks. Thank you for listening to Our Prenup Lawyer. Make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop a comment below. Follow us on Instagram at Our Prenup Lawyer, and listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and watch us on YouTube. See you guys next time.